How's it going, fellow Kryptonians? Welcome back to a brand new Superman and Lois breakdown, recap and review. This is for episode 5. Thank you for clicking on today's video. I really appreciate that. And we've got quite a bit to discuss, especially as Superman and Lois has been on a little bit of a break now. It feels really good to have it back. And in this episode, yeah, let's just say things are getting a bit sketchy on all fronts, from Ali and a little bit more context from her background. And then John. Man, John is going down the dark path, so it seems. So without wasting too much more time, guys, I would love it if you could consider maybe liking this video, only if you do go on to enjoy it. Just click that little thumbs up button, and maybe also subscribe if you want to see more breakdowns just like this on the channel. And hey, if you think you're subscribed, double check, because a lot of you are telling me that you think you're subscribed, but actually it turns out that you're not. It's just that the videos get recommended to you on your YouTube homepage. But right at the beginning, I found this part really interesting, because I didn't actually think, I mean, maybe I should have seen this coming, if I'm in all honesty, but I didn't necessarily think that the pendant would be locked to Ali. And I feel like with this whole ascending to another world thing, I feel really silly now. With what Ali was doing with her disciples, you could say, and what Lucy Lane was talking about crossing over and stuff. Sure, some of us might have read into various theories there, but I didn't actually think the pendant would be directly related to her, because as we saw in that 1979 flashback, we had that lawyer, I believe, with Ali and her older brother, but it turns out that the will was left to Ali entirely, and for her to actually inherit everything, she had to, like it was a condition of the will, inherit the actual amulet, or pendant, if you will. Now, her brother was just like, no, that freaking amulet has destroyed our family for generations. We can end the cycle, you and me. So I guess her brother was willing to just give up everything in the inheritance just so that they wouldn't inherit the amulet. It just wasn't worth it to him. And he even mentioned that the thing is poisonous and it's what killed their father. I'm very interested to see how the amulet itself killed him, unless maybe he was trying to cross over, and, you know, considering what we saw with Chrissy, like, you know, you basically have to practically die to cross over to the other Bizarro-esque, you know, reverse world. Either way, though, the lawyer said it's up to you to finish his life's work or whatever, and clearly we can see how she turned into the woman she is today. And Lois at this point feels a little bit guilty about, you know, the whole Lucy thing, and I found it interesting in how, I don't know, did anyone else find it? I'm not saying it was massively off, I just felt like, oh, unless I'm forgetting anything from the last episode, it's just like now Lois is suddenly occurring to her, oh, you know, she might be wrong, and she says to Clark that Ali's talk about shadow dimensions and mirror cells, it sounded crazy, but with Bizzaro and him just flying around and coming into the story, now he bursted through the Earth's crust, she's now wondering if the two are related. Maybe it's just because I really didn't necessarily see that being intrinsically linked, with Ali being the holder of the pendant, and now I just feel like Lois suddenly being like, okay, you know, maybe what Ali's doing and that cult stuff is actually linked to this Bizarro version of you, Clark. It just felt kind of a little bit out of nowhere in the Kent farm. At least that was just the impression I got, but maybe because it's been a few weeks, I'm kind of forgetting something that kind of had her cotton on to the fact that maybe there is most certainly something more to this. The Cushing storyline this episode, we'll save a bit of it for the end, but it's a little bit messy if you think about it. I mean, if it's not, you don't even have to think about it. It's very messy. And this has been set up with Kyle. He instantly, when they're having that family time at the beginning, you know, a little bit of dancing and stuff, gets a call, or a text, should I say. Well, actually, I think he does get a call from Tonya, and I was like, damn, like, oh god, it's one of those somewhat cliche stories where she's gonna get involved. And what I like about this episode, by the way, and I'll mention this in another way later with Chrissy, is that I get concerned that they might be going a little bit cliche or tropey, or maybe a bit too, you know, with the way CW have done things before, but then they subvert my expectation. For example, later on when that lady, Tonya or whatever, did approach Kyle, I thought she'd be like, oh, I love you, please just come back with, but it turns out she wasn't really interested in anymore. So I'm glad they do things where, yes, she is getting involved, and oh god, this is going to be a spanner in the works for the family and Lana's mayoral candidacy. But again, I feel like if this was CW 5 years ago, she would be that kind of ex-girlfriend trying to just still get Kyle back. But they didn't do that. It's just nice to know that they're not going always so, obviously tropey here. Around about this time, we had Superman visit Tag in hospital, and this is quite interesting because I wonder what is in store for Tag in the future, considering his team is dead. So this is just him now, just chilling there, recovering. Unfortunately, he went there to go get the pendant because they thought they could use that to track Bizzaro and, finally get down to the bottom of this, but he gave it to Anderson. He was just following orders. I do hope we see more of Tag because I find the prospect of just having other meta, somewhat infected people a really interesting one. And the fact that we have Superboy and we have Jonathan probably eventually getting powers because, long story short, preview of later, I don't feel like these are actual powers coming through. Not to say that he won't get his actual genetic unlock of powers. But yeah, I would like to see more from this. That's when Sam Lane rocks up, and I felt a little bit iffy about this storyline, as much as I was really enjoying it at the same time, because initially he was trying to lie, saying, oh yeah, I'm just hanging out with Grandpa or whatever, but then it was kind of clear, and it was revealed that Jordan is getting training, and Sam Lane even said to Jonathan that whether Clark wants to hear it or not, he may need Jordan's help. Lois and Clark are to go batshit crazy when the time comes. They will. If you think of any kind of Lois rant in any previous episode when she's gone ham at anyone, or especially her dad, that's going to be like that tenfold. But it does also somewhat make sense because this has happened before. Jordan has been there to help his father, but obviously it's a little bit dodgy doing it behind the backs of Lois and Clark. Initially we saw them doing 50 push-ups in a minute, like Jesus. Jordan didn't really break a sweat, but Jonathan did. This somewhat spurred him on when Sam Lane told him to get some water to take the XK again. And I completely understand the mind state that Jonathan's in from season 1, as we say week in, week out on the reviews of this channel in both seasons so far. You always feel quite a bit of empathy for Jonathan, always being left out in the lurch. He's kind of the guy who's not so involved with his father and son's relationship of, oh, the Kryptonian side of things. And he's the guy holding, oh, look, I've got the gun, I guess. Oh, this is cool, but not as cool as that. And then on top of that, the football stuff, always being on the sub bench, is basically his identity at this point, to somewhat feel a little bit left out. So I'm not saying, obviously, ever to condone doing what he's doing, but you can understand how he got there. But this is where he's becoming a bit of a jerk. I do believe that is somewhat, XK being treated like somewhat other drugs, and how, I guess, the more you use it, you can get a bit more of an irritability to yourself, a bit of a personality change. You start to become someone you might not recognize in retrospect. And I do feel like we're going to see that coming, whether it's in several episodes' time, a version of Jonathan who kind of looks back and just has a breakdown, thinking I'm so sorry, I can't believe I became this person. But I wonder if that's going to come after something that he's done that is something that maybe he can't take back. But things are already spicing up in this moment. That's the interesting thing, because then he wanted to have a bit of training with Jonathan in terms of boxing. And Sam Lane agreed to that. Now, this is one of the few things of this episode I wasn't a massive fan of. Now, the reason why I'm not a massive fan of this is that the thing is, Sam Lane is aware, and I have to assume he's aware because he's freaking, he was General Lane. Jordan has the ability to, we've seen him punch his fist into the wooden block in that same, celery part of the barn, and have other damage, and take damage as well, from even Morgan Edge. So, for Sam Lane, this isn't even me being pedantic here. If he's allowing a sparring match, knowing full well that Jonathan hasn't come into any Kryptonian abilities at this point, even XK aside, what's important to remember here is that that's not in Sam Lane's mind. He doesn't know that. So he's taking into account that, yeah, I'm going to get an actual Superboy Kryptonian kid of Clark and Lois's who has come into their abilities, who has got powers, to box Jonathan. Even if he's pulling his punches, he's condoning a little training session that could result in, for all intents and purposes, and Sam Lane should notice, that Jordan could punch Jonathan's head backwards and spin it around 5 times. I think that, okay, I can get past him wanting to go behind Lois and Clark's back, but to condone a training match here, as much as I enjoyed it and things were getting tense and Jonathan kicked ass, his reflexes were insane, and with the XK he has ingested, he was actually pretty badass, and I felt bad at the same time because Jordan got his ass kicked. But again, do you see my point here? I feel like sacrificing the, I guess you could say, intelligence of this character of Sam Lane to just give us a badass scene. I'm not gonna lie. Let me put it this way. I know this didn't happen because it was written on the paper not to happen, but the logic we have to go with here is that this could have ended up with Jonathan getting punched and his neck broken, even if Jordan was pulling his punches, because he's still newbie at this. He might have done something and he didn't mean for it to happen because he has super strength. That's something he's still learning with how to be a Kryptonian with these abilities. And Sam Lane was just like, yeah, you could do that. It's your call. Could you imagine if, like, this ended up with Jordan accidentally killing his human brother, at least for now, human brother, and Sam Lane having to explain to Lois, yeah, I was not only doing something you'd be pissed off with, training him behind your back, but I also allowed him to fight his brother who hasn't come into his Kryptonian abilities. And yeah, I guess, like, I thought a punch in the face wouldn't actually have done that much damage to Jonathan. I don't know why I thought that, but I did, and it resulted in his death. It just makes him look a bit stupid. I'm really saying that criticism in good faith. To me, it just didn't make sense for Sam Lane with the knowledge he has. Either way, though, Ren over there, we have Jonathan saying, maybe you're just training the wrong kid. Again, I do think this is the XK speaking, but it's also got the grains of truth in it, if you will, because it's what I've aforementioned. He is a good man, and I think he's always buried the kind of envious aspect he's had of maybe wishing he was Superboy. But now it's coming out a bit more candidly and jealousy type way, like saying, maybe you're training the wrong kid. I should be the guy you're training. This should be me. Now, with the Lois and Chrissy storyline, I was quite nervous, if I'm being honest, because as of the phone call at the end of last episode, you might remember in my review, I was thinking, no. Again, this is what I was mentioning earlier with the subverting expectations thing. I was worried they were going to go down the typical storyline of, oh, now Chrissy has got to become one of the disciples. It's like, how cliche is that? And we're going to have to deal with Lois doing a storyline, which, you know, I'm a fan of, but now not only is there Allie and her sister in the way, but there's also Chrissy in the way. It's just, that would have been, for me, that would have kind of annoyed me. But they didn't do that. Thank God, because even though it looked like they were doing that, because initially we picked up at the Gazette, there were still tensions between Lois and Chrissy, and Chrissy had good points. Like, Lois is very much so on a need-to-know basis with information she gives. That happened with Morgan Edge. She feels like, as a result, she's working for her. They're not working together. All very, very valid criticisms of Lois's character, even though for Lois, we do understand at least 3/4 of it is the fact that she needs to protect the identity of Superman and how she is a lot of in the know because of that. But again, I was getting a bit concerned at this part because it was like, oh god, this is just steering her more towards when she meets with Ali again. She's just going to be seduced and find out that for some reason you can cross over and this means, oh god, I'm now converted. And that just would have been way too straightforward for me. But again, I'm so thankful that wasn't the case. In the meantime, though, when Chrissy went to go find out the truth for herself, we had Lois spot Dr. Faulkner, lady from the mines, of whom we've been wondering, who was she contacting on that phone the whole time? A lot of us were thinking that she was the one calling up maybe Lieutenant Anderson. Like, we thought maybe he was the one behind getting Bizzaro out and there's going to be some kind of reveal there. But no, turns out that she's actually attending one of Ali's freaking disciple cult meetings, if you will. So that was super interesting. Now, this is when Clark goes to visit Anderson, and I like how kind of gruffled looking he is now. He's quite rough. He's letting his stubble grow out a bit. His pride is clearly a bit wounded because Clark was right. I warned you that these were kids. I warned you this, and he's just like, well, I'll have you know, that they were my best option, and they were badass and stuff, and it just looks stupid. Like, Anderson, you're an idiot. I don't get why. The only thing I'm struggling with this storyline is why he has such an issue with not trusting Clark, because basically in this conversation, when he was asking for the pendant, he refused him, and he's worrying that he's maybe going to use it to power himself up because it is showing that for some reason the amulet, or when they're together, both of them were stronger. Again, I don't get this doubt. You could say it is like a military inherent somewhat mindset to think about or assess the threat that could be happening with Superman, and since this man isn't General Lane, to be fair to him, his objectiveness and kind of military assessment here, and with the way they've rubbed each other the wrong way in certain conversations and how he wants him under his banner, Clark hasn't done that. So I think in of itself, that energy there has put a bit of distrust. So I guess that works in terms of trusting, or not trusting, should I say, Superman in this moment, but it is still a little bit aggravating because it's just like, dude. But again, to play devil's advocate, this other frickin' version of Superman looks like Superman. So I guess, with a newbie to the situation, no longer being General Lane, he may be a little bit too against Superman for my liking, but I guess it does make sense. It's not like it doesn't make any sense. Now, just to chuck a little random speculation out here, now he doesn't really have a superhero team and it's just Tag. And the way he's kind of, I wouldn't say seething, he's not angry like that, but he seems a bit annoyed in a sense. You can clearly tell as I said, his appearance is meant to reflect that a little bit. I wonder if his arc this season is going to push him to like, okay, so they can't deal with it, my team of kids, so to speak. So with what we've mentioned before, I wouldn't be surprised if Anderson looks in on himself to handle this. Well, if you can't get others to do something, do it yourself. So maybe he will ingest XK himself. I know that with a military sound mind like his, he might be thinking, well, why, you shouldn't do that. But he might be trying to tackle this problem so much, like, we've seen before in various characters in various shows and movies or stories before, that he is willing to take that risk in order to make himself more powerful to fulfill what he believes in. I know that sounds cliche and tropey in of itself, but what's next for Anderson? It can't just be continuously disagreeing with Clark. Surely in some way or another, he's gonna end up something more, and maybe through a method of his own madness to see the job done. But I would love to know your thoughts there. Now, the next bit really surprised me. So we had Lois head to the mines as she found out about Dr. Faulkner, and it turns out Bizzaro was there, and he looked at her, flew past her. Clark wondered a little bit later on, maybe there's a version of you in the reverse world, and he recognizes that. By the way, like, screw all of that, Dr. Faulkner's neck was, like, wrapped around, like, 180 in her body, and I don't know. I didn't expect to see that on the CW. Like, this is still the same rating, and we don't really see that on other shows. Call me crazy, I don't watch every Arrowverse show anymore, like Supergirl, or maybe they've done something like that there, or maybe they did something like that in the latter seasons of Black Lightning, I don't know, but it's still quite graphic when you know that the head is wrapped around like that. It just subverted my expectation. This is the part I was on about earlier with subverting expectations. We had Chrissy go to Allie, and she was drugged with her tea, and I was like, great, yep, this is going exactly the way I was fearing. And we picked up in that scene with her ascending, and she was like, you're going to ascend. I was like, this is just going to go with Chrissy waking up and believing it because she did see it, and great, it's going to be everything I was mentioning I was worried about earlier. And it is really twisted to do this, just as what happened with Lucy and how Lois did save her. You have to be dead, because as Allie's freaking security dude said, it's been 7 minutes since he felt anything, and he was feeling her pulse then. So there were 7 minutes. Arguably, if you want to get nitpicky here, that's 7 minutes without oxygen to the brain. So she should be kind of brain dead. But either way, she wakes up. To be honest, I can put in the amulet doing something weird there, and for some reason it keeps her body alive and resurrected her there and gave her the experience. But again, I was very apprehensive. Great, Chrissy's now seen everything in the other world and she's going to believe it. But no, she saw everything. She was impressed almost and bewildered. But if anything, it was just a good story for her to now, like, write down for her reporting. It doesn't mean she was brainwashed. And I was like, thank you, Superman and Lois, for not just making her brainwashed. And what I was mentioning earlier, she's just now got the experience. She can report that back to Lois, as she does later on. She describes that she was her, but not quite her. This kind of bizarre version of herself, quite on the nose there. Everything in the world was strange, and she says it was off, but also Allie was everywhere. So in this moment, Superman and Lois literally arrive. It's just like, oh, doesn't that look like your husband? But anyway, she said she was here to protect Allie, and that is because Bizzaro was coming to kill her. And this ends up in a really cool fight. As I've been saying for a while now, and in this episode, even during this fight, I felt kind of bad for him. I had this empathy for him, because even though he looks monstrous, there's somewhat suffering aspect to him that it can't be as simple as it seems. And this fight, anyway, again, a big fan of the effort they put into making this look good. With Superman, you really do have to try and pull that off. Again, he's the opposite of Superman, so instead of like a cold freeze breath, it's like a dragon's fire. This ended up around about them being near the mines or something, or at the mines, and Superman uses these XK reinforced punches. So I guess they, technically souped him up even more, because XK makes other people stronger, so I guess XK for Clark gave him more pack-a-punch, so to speak. Now, in the meantime, we have Bizzaro at the fortress, and it turns out that Clark's mother is kind of looking into that. I kind of wish we saw that scene, and I guess this is just grander confirmation of what we thought last season. We have Jor-El being replaced by Clark's mother, so that's a cool new take on just super traditionalist canon. As I said, the fortress is now governed, or the advice that Superman seeks is not from his father, but his mother. And this is where we had that whole kind of like dressy situation with Sarah going on, but this led to some family drama with what is going on with Kyle. And in the meantime, not to mention, we even have Jonathan playing up there as well. And he's just like, maybe I'm just better than you, and you should get used to it because I'm going to get stronger. And so again, just my predictions for this is that he's going to get to a point of doing something so bad that it gets to a breaking point. I'd love to know your ideas here. It does suck in a way, but this is what they kind of want to get out of you, seeing these brothers who we've we've seen so nicely demonstrated be there for each other. I've really enjoyed those moments in the past couple of seasons so far of the brotherly moments, but now it's just like one of them's being toxic to the other one. And to Jordan, of all people, who probably looks up to Jonathan. Jonathan looks after Jordan more than Jordan looks after Jonathan. I think that stings extra hard. So I felt really bad for Jordan in that aspect. But anyway, Kyle goes outside, speaks to the lady he used to kind of, want to leave Lana for, and she says that she told her girlfriend about the situation, and her girlfriend thought it was kind of crappy, and she was like, oh yeah, maybe the Mayor Dean guy, would pay for information like this. And I was like, oh god. Oh god, no, this is not going to be good. And basically when he goes back in to the party, if you will, we have the mayor flexing. Basically giving those subliminal messages saying, yeah, your family must be full of surprises. And you could literally hear the sweat break from, Kyle's head. For the time being, this has been put on pause because Lana did find out, technically it was Sarah and Jordan who found out first. So they're going to have to deal with that as a family. But for now, they don't want to deal with it there and then. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. I hope it doesn't drag out. I mean, I understand how it might because this is a serious family issue to deal with. So I would love to know what you guys think of what this is really going to do to the Cushing family. Will they be able to rebuild? I'm assuming that Lana's going to take a massive setback for many episodes, and then maybe they'll grow back to each other, because this was a thing that Kyle never did pursue back in the day, but ultimately, bottom line, he did pursue it at the inception of it. So yikes. Now, this is where we have Chrissy update Lois, and this is really important because it can give us a bit of context as to what Allie could be doing and why she's a threat. And she said that everyone in that world, or even Chrissy's other dad, was terrified of Allie, and that she's taken over the country, maybe even the world. So imagine this like other world, or like our world, being taken over, like every country or whatever is just flagged, and banners of Allie are everywhere. And that's kind of, it's just like, how? So I'm wondering what she really plans to do in this world, because when you combine that with when Clark heard her mother saying, okay, he's up, let's talk to him, and they managed to figure out his speech, because if you didn't know already, all the times we heard him talk before, it was just the audio in reverse, but now they've done something in the fortress to kind of reverse it back to normal, and we can hear what he's saying, and he says, we're at war, and like Clark's like, well, no, we're not, and he's just like, not yet, like you will be. So clearly, they've been trying to fight Allie, and how she's dominated Bizarro's world in his world in the past, and now Bizzaro is kind of over here to basically help this world as well, because he literally says himself, like, I'm trying to save my world and yours. He goes on to say that Allie Alston will destroy everything you love, your friends, your family. You will lose it all unless you kill her first. Now, this wasn't confirmed in this moment, but it did make me feel even more sorry for him, because I was like, if he's saying that, has this Bizzaro lost his own reverse version of Lois, his own reverse version of their kids? If he's saying, and it was just the look on his face, you'll lose it all, your friends, your family. So it's like, damn, maybe he's trying to prevent that from happening. And when he saw Lois, even though it wasn't his Lois, that must have been painful for him to see, if that is the case. It's kind of like a John Henry Irons situation, but just kind of for Bizzaro, losing his own Lois in the sense. I could be completely wrong there, but it's now super interesting to see that this somewhat villainous Bizzaro, even though I kind of figured that there was more to him, I think like a lot of us did, than just being an evil pendant wielding Bizzaro version of Superman or whatever, that there could be a bit more complexity to him. Yes, he's the reverse of Superman. He could be like reverse in other ways as well than just powers, but he clearly still was trying to defend his own world from this evil Allie who's taken over his own little parallel weird reverse dimension-y universe. So I'd love your theories with that. Does this mean that Bizarro's going to work with Superman now? If that happens, what would that look like to Anderson? That would make him look like, oh, Superman has been turned. This could spur Anderson on to be like, oh, you are the enemy. I always knew I couldn't trust you. And then that spurs him into doing his own thing of what we were theorizing about earlier. I know this is going to get more twisted. I just don't know how yet. And I could be way off, but something more is going to happen. And the last thing we have to talk about is when Jonathan was apologizing to Jordan for what happened to Sarah. And he's like, come on, man. Fair enough, but there's something you're hiding here, and Jonathan flips out. Again, the irritability of him taking this stuff. That's when he kind of gets angry, but his eyes glow, almost like in a heat vision way, but it was green-esque, so it was like an XK version of heat vision in a way. And that is when, bless his heart, Jordan's kind of believing his brother. His brother's just playing off like, oh, my powers have only just come in. I don't want to tell mum and dad quite just yet, because you know what they're like, they'll turn me off the football team. So he was taking advantage of his brother there, and clearly his powers, in my opinion, haven't come in. This is just him still being under the influence of XK. I do, however, think, and am wondering if the prolonged use of XK will somewhat unlock his inherent Kryptonian genes. That is still yet to be seen, but I do feel like what we just saw at the end of the episode there isn't that happening. It's just, yeah, it's just the XK he took that day. I do wonder if this is going to get out to Lois and Clark now, since Jordan just thinks, you know, it's his powers coming through. And whenever that drop happens, and I think it's going to happen in a situation where Jordan's like, oh yeah, well, maybe you should tell mum and dad about your powers, when they have another disagreement, but instead that time it's in front of Lois and Clark, and they're like, powers, Jonathan? But when they obviously look into it, they're like, no, those aren't Kryptonian powers. This is, you know, Kryptonian drugs. So all in all, guys, you know, I think that concludes the episode, and I thought it was like a decent episode to return back, you know, from the break of Superman and Lois. I felt like it pushed things along on every front, especially with the revelation of Allie. Also, just in a grander scheme of her plan, does this mean that she's going to try and get every reverse version of herself who follows it? Because think about it, if she's taken over the country, or maybe even the world, in this other world reverse version, that means she has a lot of followers, a lot of generals, lieutenants, army potentially, that she could bring over in the same way that Bizzaro somehow got here. That's something to be learned as well. How did he get here from that place? And she could, in a way, take over this world in somewhat of a weird Crisis on Earth X version, if you know what I mean. Maybe if she can bring them across, they can take over this world with force. It's a bit like, I would like to know why. I feel like we need more substance to Allie. So it's like, okay, but why? It's one thing to believe that she believes about ascending and she's culty and stuff, and she believes that she's doing this thing and brainwashing people. But no, it might not be that now. If she wants to take over this world, what is her aspiration to do that? Is she just evil for evil's sake? I want to know. Maybe she just wants to have everyone ascend and she's going to force that upon them. I would love your ideas there, but we've got a lot of development. We know there's more to Bizzaro now. Jonathan's going down a dark road, so I'm looking forward to having Superman and Lois back weekly now. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know your theories. I read every single comment, so I'm really looking forward to seeing them. Give this video a like if you did enjoy it. Make sure you subscribed as well for more updates, breakdowns, news, and reviews for everything you're probably interested in. I do cover a lot here, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.